Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. It is Saturday, the 19th of October, and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. So here we are, Phil. It's Super Saturday, and I'm not talking about what's happening in Westminster. I'm talking about the rugby.
You are. You're going to be watching it?
Indeed, yeah. We've got England versus Australia, first thing this morning, followed by New Zealand against Ireland. And then tomorrow, we've got Wales against France and Japan against South Africa. So there's not going to be much work going on in the Hutchinson household today and tomorrow.
So do we hope that the listeners are either listening to us before the rugby starts or tuning in afterwards?
I suspect afterwards, and of course we don't have to issue a spoiler alert because we've got no idea what the scores are, folks.
Yes, not yet. No, not at all. But we have got a third listener shout out this week as well. So I was talking to a colleague, Hannah O'Brien, this week, who's an account director at Mannheim, and she just loves listening to the podcast. So thank you, Hannah, for tuning in on a weekly basis. And I think you have got a bit of a fan there, Curtis, with reading the news out there.
Yeah, well, massive shout out to Hannah there. Hope you enjoy the rest of the show and keep listening. Thank you very much.
So we have got a good mix of headlines this week, haven't we, Curtis, from auto retail, AM, Motor Trader, etc. So do you want to run through what we're going to be talking about this week?
Yeah, we've got the latest on the FCA commission updates, the commission rates linked to interest. We've got some research on response times to inquiries. We've got an interesting piece on what are the most searched for fuel types on Google. We've got September wholesale trends from yourself, Phil, and we've got two pieces on really the top rated dealers according to websites, and we've got the top 50 dealers in Europe. So it's the annual ratings of the runners and riders who the biggest groups are across Europe. And we've got a bit of an uplifting and finally, it's not a funny one, it's just a sort of feel-good one because it's about millennials and their attitudes towards buying cars, because the sort of perceived wisdom is that they're not buying cars, but we found a bit of research that says, oh yes, they are.
It does, doesn't it? So we have got the first one of this week, and this is on Auto Retail Agenda, and this is on the back of the FCA announcement that has been eagerly awaited, that came out this week. And this is the headline reads that finance watchdog to ban commission to interest rate. So this is where the FCA were looking into the automotive industry, and particularly the motor finance section of the industry, and they're looking at banning discretionary commission models in the market and minor changes to the commission disclosure rules and guidance. Now, there is a 3-month implementation period where they will review customers' outcomes beginning in 2022. It's for the changes, but organisations have until the 15th of January next year, 2020, to respond to the document consultation that is out there. It involves 6 questions that they are looking at answers on. So again, I think this is more about that world of transparency, isn't it? And obviously they're talking the release and the announcement that they did survey the industry. They said that they shopped and found that 1 in 37 dealers surveyed disclosed to the customer a commission may be received for arranging finance, and that's about commission disclosure section. So again, I think the industry was probably expecting some changes on this one, but like you said before, Curtis, before we were talking before the show, that the FCA estimates that the changes would save consumers 165 million a year, but FLA don't necessarily agree with that, do they?
No, and you're right to pick up on that, because that was used in a number of headlines in the broader media. So this is a more sort of balanced account, because the Finance and Leasing Association say the proportion of finance sold using discretionary commission model is, and this is their description, very small and diminishing.
Okay, yeah. So I think it's going to be interesting, and the questions out there are talking around whether people do agree with the proposed ban on discretionary commission models in the motor industry market, whether the 3-month do they agree with the 3-month implementation period, whether they agree with the proposed commission disclosure clarifications, whether they agree with the proposed commission disclosure clarifications should apply to all consumer credit markets, and if the proposed commission disclosure clarifications should take effect on the day of the rules are made. And then finally, talking about the analysis of the costs and benefits of the proposal. So again, there's some consultations take place with this over the next few months as we head towards the deadline of the 15th of January. So again, things could change, but I think we are expecting these changes to happen.
Yeah, and if the rules do come into operation, it will be after Easter 2020. And yeah, you know what? I guess most dealers were expecting this. I think most dealers have actually fallen in line as a result of the way that the FCA rules were introduced a couple of years ago on the selling of finance, and the whole concept of treating customers fairly. So it does fall in line with what's already been set in place for the selling of finance.
Yeah, and it's things around that increasing the difference in charges, reducing the difference in charges, that scaled commission and flat commission. So again, I think you'll find now that a lot of the industry work on flat rates, and it's tough out there, and interest rate is a key part of attracting that consumer into the dealership and selling them a car on finance, isn't it? So again, I think, like you say, we're fairly covered with this one, I suspect, but it's been some interesting debates this week. There certainly has. If you look at the social world there, that a lot of people agree that it is all about transparency and controls and things like this. Other people, some of them disagree. They think that the finance commission is a large part of margin opportunity for dealers, and it allows them to do deals that may not be able to be done otherwise for the consumer, and some of them may even feel that the consumer may be the ones that do lose out because the dealer can't go into the finance commission to subsidise something else that they need to do for that consumer. So again, a lot of debate around that one. I'm sure there'll be a lot more to come.
Yeah. Now, the next headline is from Car Dealer, and it's nearly 1 in 3 car buyers expect dealer response in 15 minutes, according to survey. So that's more of a paragraph than a headline, but yeah, but that's the way they've run it, and it does basically tell the story. So more than 2/5 of car buyers are more likely to complete a purchase if they get a response to an online inquiry within 30 minutes, and this is all according to research by DealerWeb, and the research also showed that 42% of the 1,500 consumers that they polled indicated they expected a reply in under half an hour. What did you make of this, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, you've been through this recently, but I think it's got to be careful you don't broad brush this. I think there's a lot of dealer groups out there and independent dealers alike that have got control of this, are working hard to make sure that any inquiry coming into the business are dealt with very quickly. Even to the point that a lot of dealers have invested in outsourcing or managing call centres to make sure that these inquiries are managed. Some dealer groups take everything away from individual showrooms and put them into a call centre environment that they then make sure that they respond swiftly and manage that process. But again, it is, from my background, it was a key point that running any dealer that it's kind of, these people are coming inbound in terms of inquiries coming into the business, and you need to move quickly. You need to get back to them as quickly as you can, because these days they'll move on. And you've experienced some of this, haven't you, Curtis, recently?
Well, I have, yeah, because I was in the new car market 3 or 4 months ago, and most of my inquiries were actually over the phone. And I was kind of disappointed at the time that some dealers took to respond, if indeed they responded at all. Other dealers were brilliant. I'd get a call back certainly within half an hour tops. But there's work to be done, obviously, on online inquiries and phone inquiries, especially as we're seeing reduced levels of footfall across the sector. So anyone making an inquiry is effectively a hot lead, and needs to be treated as such.
What would be interesting is to see with these results here, actually away from that 15-minute and half an hour, what is the longest, or is what is the percentage in terms of no response? To put this in some kind of context, is it that 15 minutes is too short a time to be able to get back to somebody? Half an hour, I think it just questions that a little bit, doesn't it? I think in a way there is this kind of perception about making sure that you get back to the customer, some kind of acknowledgement immediately. And I think there's a lot of processes in place now that any inbound inquiry coming into any business, there's at least an acknowledgement response immediately.
Yes. Yeah.
It may not be the response to the query, but you get at least an acknowledgement to your inquiry coming into the business. So I think there's a little bit more digging to do around this survey from DealerWeb.
Yeah, and what I found really useful in my example was online chats. So you're on a dealer website and you can speak live to someone, presumably from a call center. That worked really, really well when you had specific questions that you needed answering there and then before you move on to the next part of the process. So, full marks for, 2 or 3 dealers actually who had very good live chat facilities.
Yeah, exactly. And then moving on to some more research, and this is from the guys from Honcho. These are doing little bits of snippets of research at the minute, aren't they? These guys, they've entered the sector, coming up with things that are slightly different. And this is a story that's on motortrader.com, and they're talking about EVs and hybrids being the most searched vehicle by potential car buyers, and this is how they've been looking at some of the statistics on Google on the way people are searching for cars, and found that obviously EVs and hybrids are the most searched for fuel types.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, this, and I worked with the guys at Honcho on this particular story, and what they highlighted was that by analysing Google searches and the sort of words that are being used in Google searches, they found that searches for EVs during the first 9 months of 2019, so that's up to the end of September, actually increased by 55.5% year on year. So that's for buyers who tap in the word electric as part of their initial search criteria for both new and used cars. So that's a big increase. Hybrids, they're actually up 26.2%. Also a sizable increase, while petrol was down 4% and diesel was down 13.7%. But I guess with traditional fuel types like petrol and diesel, you're not necessarily searching for a petrol car or a diesel car. You know the sort of car you're after. You know it's going to have an internal combustion engine. So this is really highlighting the level of interest now in EVs, because if you're in the market for an EV or a hybrid, chances are that's what you tap in right at the start of the process.
No, I agree. I think you're right. I mean, that's the point with this, that you will be specifically looking for that fuel type in most cases, won't you? Because you've decided you're going to go into that sector of the market. And I think I was talking to someone recently who believed that actually EVs or EV buyers are not as brand loyal or as normal buyers, that it is more about the technology and the electronic technology around it, the EV itself, rather than the manufacturer themselves. So again, that kind of highlights that. And as you say, but it does reflect the new car market shift, doesn't it, in terms of what we're seeing around that petrol, the drop in diesel, and the growth in EV and in hybrid. It kind of reflects what's happening in terms of that new car registration market.
Yeah, because the piece highlights that in the year to date, the SMMT actually showed that EVs were up 122% and hybrids increased by 15.3% in terms of registration. So it's showing where the strength of that particular market is coming from, albeit from a low base.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And then there's some analysis from myself in terms of Cox Automotive on the September market. And this is a story in AM Online, and we're talking about obviously the superheated September, and it's quite an interesting one was September, because it was a fairly strong market in terms of the wholesale market. The average age has actually increased a little bit, and the average price has actually increased slightly in September, as did the mileage. So we've seen those sort of three barometers increase in the month of September. But again, there's a lot going on in September this year, particularly with what's happening in the new car market, the impact that's had on retail dealers. Not as many part exchanges coming into the business as they would normally have on a strong September market. Therefore, there's been less vehicles coming into the wholesale market because of they've been retaining a lot of either the cars haven't been coming in as part exchange, or they've been retaining them to retail a lot more than they may have done previously. So again, a lot of dynamics at play this September.
Yeah, plus some defleet activity was down as well, wasn't it?
It was, and I think there's a high demand for used cars in September. We have seen some strong conversions through the month, particularly as well with first-time conversion as well. That we saw strengthen. The demand for ready-to-retail cars continues. This is kind of lead time getting that vehicle in, getting it on the forecourt as quickly as possible, and in retail state as quickly as possible is still in heavy demand. A lot of activity. We talked about this the other week around the September new car results impacting what's happening in the used cars. But again, it's going to be a fairly interesting final quarter to the year that you start thinking about. Obviously, that wholesale supply is expected to continue into Q4 as part exchanges and fleet market remain limited, I suspect. Dealers still facing a lot of challenges, a lot of headwind in that new car market, and with the 31st of October becoming ever increasing closer. There's still a lot, but the goalpost changes on a day-by-day basis with that one. But again, it's going to be interesting as we start to close off the year through Q4. But again, we don't foresee a large influx of used cars entering the market. So I think it's about making sure that you're keeping on top of your stock profile, looking for the cars and working with people to obtain cars.
Yeah, and interesting, following on from the last story, one of the observations is that hybrid-powered vehicles, the value of hybrids actually declined in the analysis, along with petrol and diesel, with EVs rising. So interesting there, because we know there's a lot of interest out there in hybrids. So it's intriguing that values actually dropped.
They will, but I think as you move through time in terms of volume and the size of that vehicle park, the model mix starts to shift. The age profile starts to increase as well, and you'll start to see that with EV as well as hybrid. So if you think about the vehicle park for petrol, for diesel, you've got a very broad, a very wide age profile of those vehicles. Hybrid, not as much so, and an EV, nowhere near as much. So what you'll see coming through time is you'll start to see those average prices in the wholesale market start to reduce as volumes start to enter the sector and those cars become more and more aging in terms of their right profile. So again, it's a dynamic of the model you'll see as the part of that. But again, you've seen the EV rise there up 34% year on year. Again, that'll be about the model mix of vehicles entering the wholesale environment, and the hybrid will be that there'll be a lot more choice of hybrid vehicles, particularly in that lower medium sector and the smaller crossover sector that will be now entering the wholesale environment as well.
Now, next story is over at AM, and it's Arnold Clark tops online audit of UK motor retailers. So interesting story this. So this is based on the results of it's a digital marketing agency called Kaggle, I think it is, and they've done they've analysed the franchise dealer websites across several different criteria, which includes things like content, email marketing, search marketing, social media, and they've put together a top 26. Would you believe?
26. That's a new number for you, that one.
It is, yeah. We've never done a top 26 before, but right at the top is Arnold Clark, who scored 71.3%, and it's some interesting background within the story because Eddie Hawthorne at Arnold Clark is quoted by AM saying that how the group has actually developed its whole online proposition. So the group actually employs around 100 software and website developers as part of its digital department based in its headquarters at Glasgow, and it's built this team over the last 5 years. So it shows the level of investment now, and also how it's paying off because Arnold Clark are sitting there right at the top.
They are. I mean, it's again very mixed into it in terms of when you look at the score against the AM 100 ranking. I mean, obviously Arnold Clark's there in the top position, as you say, with 71.3% as a score, but they're fourth in terms of ranking in terms of the AM 100, and Sytner's, who are number one in the AM 100 ranking, are actually coming out at 13th with a score of 58.8 on this one.
Yeah, you're right. Pendragon rated number 2 in the AM 100. They're down at 25, and Virtue Motors, they're actually at 26, which is a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, because I know Robert and his team spend a lot of time on that digital and e-commerce world and omnichannel. So again, it's new from these guys. I've never heard from Kaggle before, so it's obviously one to watch out for and do a little bit more work around. But again, great to see these guys. Like you say, Arnold Clark's have put a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of resource behind their digital investment, and so have many of the others. I know Lookers, those guys have put a lot of effort into there, and they're in 6th position at 61.8%. So we'd probably urge you to have a look at, rather than reading all 26 out, have a look at the AM news article there, and it's some interesting results there because they're talking about that Stoneacre there coming in at I say 3rd position, but they're 17th in the AM 100, aren't they?
Yeah. In fact, why don't we do a top 5?
Go on then.
I feel the top 5 coming on. So number 5, JCT 600. Number 4, Citroen. So that's obviously part of the whole PSA group, but Citroen are singled out. Number 3, Stoneacre. Number 2, Peugeot. And number 1, as we've said, is Arnold Clark.
Yeah. So well done, guys. And then the next one, I mean, this one kind of highlights the scale of the automotive industry in the international market, and highlights obviously some of the operators within the UK market as well. And this is a story that's on Automotive News Europe, and we've spoken about these guys before, haven't we? The MO Frey guys, and they've extended their lead as number 1 in Europe dealer group. Now, when we get into the story a little bit, what took them to number 1 position is a huge business in terms of what they've done there.
Yeah, so we listeners with a good memory will recall we covered this story 12 months ago. So this is the annual ratings from that Automotive News Europe put out of the top 50 dealer groups across Europe. And as you say, ML Frey are number 1. They're a Swiss-based group. They've been number 1 since 2017 when they overtook Penske. They've got 830 franchise points across Europe, so absolutely massive. New car sales last year totaled 450,000. Used car sales 200,000. Turnover was actually up 22% to 13.5 billion euros. So this is a massive dealer group there.
And when you look at Penske, who was second at 7.92. So not quite double in terms of that revenue in euro billion turnover, but 13.5 against the next down at 7.2. That's some size of a business, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And as you say, they did grow. Emil Frey grew in 2017, I think it was, because they bought a massive business from Volkswagen, and that added a number of sites to bring them up to 830, because they actually bought 261 sites formerly owned by Volkswagen Group's Porsche Holdings Salzburg subsidiary. So this is a group with scale.
And I think we were talking before the show, and this is something I do, I keep a close eye on, because you've obviously got the European international operators. Those guys have, some of them got representation in the UK market, and then you've obviously got UK dealers trying to compete with some of these international businesses in terms of those franchise open points in the UK. And sometimes you're up against a very tough challenge with it, because, as you say there, when Emil Frey bought the 261 sites from the Volkswagen Group Porsche Holdings, some of those would have been loss-making businesses. Some of them, they may have to pay more than they're worth. They may have paid 8, 9, 10, 11 times the worth when they're worth maybe 5, 6, 7 times the worth. But when you're doing a deal on that scale across the international market, that's what they're looking at, and there'll be some winners and some losers. And part of the deal that takes place when you're at that kind of level with these manufacturers, that you may be buying businesses in territories that you don't particularly want, but it's part of the package, and you'll take them. And sometimes the UK operators are dealing at that level now. They're dealing against some of these large guys that are buying these huge international footprints directly with the manufacturers themselves. So it's a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because they made that huge acquisition, 261 sites. They possibly didn't want or need all of those 261 sites, but that's what they've got, and they're now managing that transition, and I'm sure they're turning around any underperforming sites that they have acquired.
But it is worth a look. I mean, we'll get a top 10 from you in a minute, Curtis, there. But if you can get to the story, I'd urge you to have a look at the story. It's on Automotive News Europe. Very interesting. There's some insight there from the guys from ICDP, which is Steve Young, who I know very well, who operate in that marketplace, and it kind of puts things into scale a little bit and gets you a little bit of understanding of what that European international market looks like. Those that may be interested. So I'd urge you to have a look at this story if you can.
Yeah, because there is actually a downloadable PDF of the top 50. I've had a look at it, and there's actually 14 UK groups in the top 50, including half of the top 10. So really strong showing from the UK. Now, I'm not going to do the full top 50. I'm just going to let you know which UK groups were rated, because otherwise Hannah may fall asleep.
Yeah. Yes.
So number 46, we've got John Clark Motor Group, 42 Hendy Group, 37 Stoneacre, 35 Greenhouse, 31 Listers, at 29 JCT 600, at 18 Group 1 Automotive, 15 Jardine Motors, number 12 Marshall Motor Group, number 9 Virtue, number 6 Inchcape, number 5 Arnold Clark, number 4 we've got Pendragon, and the highest rated UK group is number 3, which is Lookers.
They've got a 5.3 billion euro turnover back in 2018. So that kind of puts things into context in terms of scale of the businesses, and fantastic showing there into, like you say, from UK operators in that international European marketplace.
Yeah, half the top 10. So that really is an outstanding showing there.
Yeah. And then finally of the week, and you touched on this right at the start, and I think I can remember you writing stories about the millennials at some point, Curtis, and what will happen when the millennials don't want to buy cars and things like this. I'm sure these kind of stories have gone out then. I may have actually supplied evidence and
well, I think we'll both put our hands up at this stage. So millennials supposedly don't like cars. They're looking at all the alternatives. They're joining car sharing sharing groups, they're using Uber and not buying cars. But this is all, it's just kicked out of court by this story in Motoring Research, which the headline is "Millennials will keep the car alive," says report. And the report itself comes from Auto Trends. And it shows that millennials do like cars. They surveyed 2,150 millennials aged between 23 and 28 from across the world. And in Europe, 79% say that they already own a vehicle, while half the respondents who do not own a car expect to buy one within the next 5 years. Now, that's a nice positive story, isn't it?
Definitely, and they're talking about the despite the common perception of millennials, and like you say, as an environmentally conscious generation, petrol and diesels are the engines of choice for 53% of those as well.
Yeah.
So even it's contradicting some of the stuff we've talked about earlier and that interest in EV and hybrid. This kind of says that 53% of those surveyed would go for petrol or a diesel. And on the flip side of that, 47% of the respondents said they'd drive an alternative fuel vehicle, as you suspect. So again, very very interesting. But again, perhaps surprisingly, they did say that the research does go on to say that 82% have never used a ride-hailing app or use them. Less than once a week?
Yeah, I mean that really did surprise me, because I assumed that they would actually have something like the Uber app on their phone, but that's a high figure that aren't using ride-hailing services.
And then there's a little bit of this in the story, isn't there? Because they're obviously talking around that 70% of the respondents said that price is an important consideration, which suggests that PCP deals could be around a while longer. And going off tangents slightly here, there's been some media recently in some of the national press actually around PCP that you might start to see a little bit more about at the minute, because there's a lot of conversations going on about the boom of PCP, etc. But again, this does contradict that PCP will be the funding of choice, and you can see why. So again, quite interested with that one. And other factors included in the survey was that fuel economy was 59%, style 34%, and safety down at 30% there. So economy there against safety and style.
Yeah, and all of those beats anything like the infotainment system, smartphone connectivity, or colour. So some interesting results here. I hope they're true.
Well, you know what? I was just thinking this is more reading like fake news. I think everything that we've been considering and have the perception of has just been busted with this. I think
it has, yeah, because there was a piece of research that I remember reading and writing about fairly recently about millennials not taking driving tests. The number of millennials where the percentage had actually dropped who are applying to take driving tests, applying for provisional licenses. That number's gone down significantly over recent years. But
the stats show that they do show that 17 to 21-year-old bracket that the applying for driving licenses has severely dropped off. Now, there is two arguments with that one. It's whether they don't want to buy a car, or they haven't got that early aspiration to own a car between 17 and 21, or the counter argument that is they can't afford to drive and insure a car between the age of 71, which is why they don't apply for a driving license, because they don't believe they'll be able to afford the insurance to drive one. So there's a counter argument there, but the statistics do show a severe drop off of people applying for a driving license between the ages of 17 and 21. So interesting one, that one.
It is, yeah. No, of course, once they're over 21 and they've experienced public transport for a number of years, they're probably desperate to have their own car.
Well, it is, isn't it? I mean, your lifestyles change, don't they, and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an argument that, all of a sudden you want to do things, you want to go somewhere, you want to, the mountain biking, and your lifestyle changes. So, and sometimes you do need that car. But again, one to look at, one to think about. it does, like you say, it throws the perception of what we believed into question a little bit, doesn't it, from the survey from this one? Very, very interesting with those, what was it, 2,150 millennials between the ages of 23 and 28 is what they've based the results on.
Yeah, so we're happy to share some good news with you all this morning.
Yeah.
we're all still in jobs.
We have got a future in the industry, yes. So I think that's it for this week. There's quite a bit going on there. Some interesting stories. I think, like you say, the FCA one is one that will carry on for some time. I think there's been a little bit of debate out there on that one. A few things to come. I think the research being done by Honshaw and DealerWeb are interesting. I think we'll keep looking to that. Great work from some of these UK dealers, and particularly in that online audit and the presence of the UK businesses in that European market as well. You never know. ML4A still there at the top, way above everybody else. But it's great to have so many UK representation in that top 10 there, isn't it?
It is indeed. So enjoy your Super Saturday, everyone. I hope we did well in the rugby, all the home nations. So and we'll catch up with you next week.
Will do. Thank you for listening, and we'll have more shouts out next week. Thanks a lot.